Hi friends, welcome back to another Floor Rejects flip project. Today we've got a vintage Coronet folding chair. It's cute. It's a chair that you can find replications of at like Restoration Hardware and um, um, other high-end furniture stores like Pottery Barn for like over $400 to $500. It's really ridiculous when these are, I wouldn't say they're common chairs, but they're definitely not uncommon. You can see here some of the damage. It had been scraped up. The finish was actually kind of peeling in some places. Some scuffs to the leather or leatherette. I'm not really sure what it was. Some minor damage to the cushion itself. Really not like in terrible shape. It's a chair that you could sit at a distance and not really notice what was wrong with it, but it had some loose joints. You can see they're the original stamping on the bottom of the chair. So here we're fixing the loose joint the best that I could, because the chair was actually nailed together, it seemed like, at the point where the joint and the support met. So basically what I had to do was just kind of squeeze glue in there and then knock it into place with a hammer on either side, just kind of covering up the hammerhead with a cloth or something to stop the wood from being damaged. That was the first time I'd ever seen square headed screws. You can see here I'm taking the brackets off of the chair so that I can, in the next step, refinish it. I didn't take the chair completely apart, like piece by piece by piece. It didn't feel super necessary, and I also didn't know if I could put it back together if I got it apart. So I opted to just glue together the damaged parts, remove the seat and the backing so that I could reupholster them and not worry about like loose stain getting all over them. And then I tackle the frame in one section and then the reupholstering in the other section of it. I will tell you, when you're doing stuff like this, just make sure you put all of the hardware in like one cup, separated by area of like chair, desk, or whatever you're refinishing. You can see here as I sand it down, there's a lot of little nicks and scratches and dings, and you can see I'm kind of wiping them down to check and see if they're still there. But once you put the finish back on it, and here I just opted for a little bit darker of a finish, a little bit less yellow of a finish, to cover it up. I think it's, I couldn't tell you the name of it. And I actually went back and forth a couple times and would like resand certain areas if it just didn't feel right to me, which you're not really supposed to do because you can accidentally, cross-contaminate your stain. Again, like I've said in the last couple of videos, I'm doing this for stuff that I want to keep in my house that is not like I'm not professionally reselling it or anything. You can see though, when I put this stain on, it really is, and it's at like 50 billion times speed. It really does give that richness and darkness back to the wood that was missing. Because before it was just all scuffed up and peeling, and now it looks clean and fresh. You can see here what I'm doing is taking apart the seat back, which I discovered, and this is the case with a lot of these types of chairs, is actually one part padding, and I'm unstapling them basically here, is one part padding and cover, and the other part is just a back cover so that you don't see any seams. So you can see that back cover came off, and then behind it is just wood with some staples in it. So I unstapled the whole thing. You can see here I did a fun little time lapse where you can count each of the staples as they come out. And then what I'm doing is peeling it all back, but keeping that leather or leatherette, whatever it is, keeping those pieces of fabric in as solid a pieces as possible, trying not to damage them at all. Not because I want to keep them necessarily, but because they make excellent patterns for, cutting out the new fabric. So there we've got the the front of the back, if that makes sense. And then you see here, I just picked up the back kind of plate that covers up the seams, which was just a piece of thin cardboard with the, well, let's just call it fabric, with the fabric glued down onto it. I could just peel it off. What I would recommend is, if you feel like you're doing a lot more damage to it when you're peeling off the fabric, leave the fabric on and just upholster over it. Usually it's not going to be that big of a deal. Here I'm just tracing out a loose pattern of the fabric. I'm going around it with a bit more space than you would think necessary, only because as that pattern fabric kind of wrinkles up and I'm tracing it, I want to make sure that I'd rather have a little bit too much fabric and have to trim some off than not have enough when I'm 3/4 of the way through stapling it. So I've cut out the pattern here. Let's see what I'm doing. I'm cutting out the other half. So you can see the way that this chair was constructed, it's just kind of glued on the edges and the rest of it is left loose. So I could just go around, trim out the rough shape of it, and then glue it back down to that same piece of cardboard instead of cutting out a new piece. Because the whole point of this, of me going and buying vintage stuff, is not just because I like the look of it, even though I really do. Apparently that's called being a retrophile, but I also feel like let's reuse as much as we can. If something is damaged and it's unsightly, fix it, of course. But if there's nothing wrong with it, why waste time cutting new parts out, cutting out new fabric, doing all of that when you don't have to? Here you can see I took the back with the padding, laid it down, sprayed a little bit of adhesive, and you can see there's a wrinkle in that fabric, which is like a red-orange mid-century colored corduroy. That wrinkle just kind of steamed itself out after a while, but I would recommend probably ironing your fabrics if they have big wrinkles in them, or a heavy pattern that you're going to see any discrepancies in. But I'm just repeating what was already there. Here we've got the seat cover. Now you've seen me recover seats before, and we all know I'm not the cleanest when it comes to recovering them. But what I will say is with this one, I tried to go in straight lines because I didn't really want to cover up that badging, that insignia that shows that this is where this seat originally came from. Not because I'm looking to resell it or, like make a profit off of it, but because I like being able to see that when I flip it up. I like being able to see, hey, this is where this came from. This is original. This is this piece of furniture's history, or like, let's not be extra, but like its provenance. This is what it is. This is not a recreation. This is not some like fast furniture thing. Here, if you pay attention, I'm cutting relief cuts into this rounded edge just so when I pull the fabric over to staple it, the wrinkling is not so bad on the edges. I learned that from Serena Apia over at Thrift Diving, to just do some relief cuts when you're cutting rounded or corners to reupholster. And I'm just kind of messing with it. It doesn't have to be precise, you'll see. Because at the end of the day, it's a chair for me. And you also have to think about, when you're doing this, time versus appearance. Are you going to spend 30 minutes, stapling down fabric in such a particular fashion that you'll never see any of the imperfections for something that you would never see anyway? So the bottom of a chair that's sitting across from my couch, which is pretty high up, I'm never going to see the bottom of that chair. The only time I will ever see the bottom of that chair is if it falls over, something knocks it over, or if I flip it up. And if I flip it up, if I'm in front of guests, I'm not ashamed to say, yeah, I reupholstered it myself and it looks great, huh? I didn't waste product, resources, or time, making sure that every single part of the underside was perfect, because it's not necessary. You see there, I trim it. Once I set the chair back down, it looks normal. And that's kind of what I keep in mind when I'm redoing a piece of furniture. If I'm redoing it for myself, I'm not concerned with, making sure that the hidden parts are perfect. Now, if you're going to sell something, you might want to do that. Now, these back brackets are odd. You see, I slide the back in, and there's no holes in the fabric. I just kind of drilled into those holes. And that's how I re-secured it, because there were no holes in the wood. But here we are, the finished chair. I've messed with the saturation a little just so you can see the real color of the chair. It's a really deep orangey red color. I'm trying to up my production value so that you can see a 360 of the chair without pictures. You can see it in motion. Doing the best I can here. But you can see it's a beautiful chair. I think it's beautiful. The joints are much more solid. The finish is no longer broken and scuffed and chipping and peeling. It's all one piece. There's nothing wrong with it. It looks great. At least to me, it looks great, and that's what's important. I didn't polish the brass or the hardware only because I like the color of it, and I think that doing that would maybe I don't think it would add much to it. In fact, it would make the chair look like it was a brand new chair, and that's not what I want. I want it to be the vintage chair that it is. So Here is the chair. It's finished. I'm not going to keep talking about it. You see what it is. If you have a vintage folding chair like this, it's really easy to take it apart, reupholster it, sand it down. I didn't seal the wood just because it's not necessary. It's really not necessary if you're just doing this for fun. So I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you listening. Come back next week. I've got a broken mirror that I'm going to be fixing from the 80s and another chair to reupholster. Thanks, guys. Bye.